Hi everyone, I'm Casey Frashante, and today I was supposed to film a video about Ghislaine Maxwell and her chart. I posted a video about it a couple months ago, but I wasn't happy with it, and I kind of skimmed over a few things that I meant to cover, but just wasn't really in the right mindset for. I'm not really in the right mindset for it right now either. I don't know why I did my makeup like this. I experimented with a new hijab style that I've never tried before, and so I'm deciding to just roll with the punches and do a very kind of impromptu uh, book tutorial, library collection book tier list on astrology books. And I'll just start with the first one that I think I ever bought. This was the first kind of real astrology book. I had some books on the moon before that that I think were just kind of gifts because I was always kind of into astrology. But this is the first one that was like recommended to me to get as a beginner, and it's called The Only Way to Learn Astrology. These come in a collection. I think I have the whole collection. Um, and this book is fine for beginners. It's by Marion D. March and Joan Evers. It's fine for beginners. There are better cookbook astrology books out there. It's just that this one I think has been around since like the 70s. It's probably kind of the go-to, the most popular one that people typically recommend. Um, and it just covers, the sun, what the sun represents, the moon, what the moon represents, aspects between planets. So, for example, Moon conjunct Pluto, Venus square Pluto, um, Saturn square Jupiter, things like that. And then it'll also go through sun in the houses or every planet in every house and, things of that sort. And I wouldn't recommend it because there is a better one by Sue Tompkins that I would recommend far more. And this one is just it's very, very general. I can't think of any time I've used this book to really get any kind of understanding on astrology. It's kind of, if anything, this kind of just helped me get used to certain terminology and things that constantly come up when you study astrology. I'll just read you like an excerpt of a placement that I have, and I'll kind of just give you my opinion. So if we look at Sun in the third house, keyword communicative, observant, optimistic, scientific, and flexible, you may be able to make the right decisions at the right time. Frequently a good speaker and writer, you enjoy getting involved in neighborhood affairs and traveling. Brothers and sisters, if you have any, are often important to you, and your early environment was probably happy. Mine wasn't. You can either be impartial and self-reliant or arrogant and domineering. Sun in the third house acts much like a sun in Gemini. And yeah, okay, I can relate to optimistic, maybe, good at speaking, no, not really, good at writing. I mean, it takes me a lot of effort to do these things, but I wouldn't necessarily say that I'm good at them. Um, and communicative, I mean, I guess, but there are other things in my chart that point to that. Uh, so it's very kind of these baseline descriptions that can really apply to anyone. And so I would not recommend this book. This is probably going to go in maybe like a D tier. And then if we move on to the second, so that was volume one. This is volume two by the same authors. This one is called Math and Interpretation Techniques, and it was a big leap. I remember from reading volume one, which is just kind of like hee hee ha ha, Sun in Libra description, and then Mercury and Sagittarius, something like that. To then moving on to the second volume, which talks about how you calculate the ascendant without any kind of software, because again, these are from the 70s. And getting out an atlas and doing all this math stuff. And then it talks about, having a certain sign on the second house cusp and everything like that. And it's like I don't want to say it's not valid. It's just okay, having, Taurus like me on the second house cusp, it's kind of okay. It doesn't really matter until you get to predictive analysis and then you see that, Venus would be ruling the second house. And if there's kind of you're seeing some kind of, aspects to Venus, you're talking about second house matters. And it's just again, it was like going from hee hee ha ha kind of descriptions to then being told, how to calculate the ascendant without a computer, the degree of the ascendant without a computer, to then also learning about planetary speed. And it was just such a large kind of like it was like you're trying to like jump over like the Grand Canyon or something. There was so much space to fall through that I remember reading this one about three times and I still probably don't really get the math behind it that well. I don't think it was actually explained that well. I'm not interested in hand drawing charts just because the computer can do it for me, maybe one day. But again, I feel like there are other mathematical books out there that would do a better job of explaining everything. This is probably going to go in E tier. And then we have volume three, horoscope analysis. This one was, I remember being really dry, really boring. It just kind of goes through, the ruler of the third in the 12th. Again, in my opinion, you should just get comfortable enough with the planets and the houses and interpreting them on your own and not relying on a book to tell you these really like nuanced takes, because that's up to the astrologer to um, feel the chart and make it apply to them and how they're interpreting it and based on what they know about the native as well. Um, and it just goes through. I remember, like, I think it speaks about like Mozart's chart, Princess Diana's chart, Vincent van Gogh's chart, and it was just kind of boring because I felt like they were always kind of reaching for these certain kinds of descriptions, and it was kind of like, yeah, it's just. I remember not liking it at the time, so this is probably going to go in F tier for me. And then there's also volume four, which is current patterns, progressions, directions, solar and lunar returns, and transits. So that's kind of a mouthful. And again, this one was just kind of, I think I read this one after kind of getting kind of comfortable with transits and progressions and stuff. And this didn't add anything to my arsenal. It was kind of just, kind of muddled everything in my head. It was just not helpful for me. I'm like, obviously, if you can get these books kind of, secondhand in a collection, like, if I was to sell all of these books together for like 50 or $100 and maybe pick them up, I wouldn't recommend going out and buying this one just because I don't think you should be learning about transits, progressions, solar directions, solar returns, I think it covers as well. You shouldn't be learning about that all in one book, and it's this small book. So you should be learning about them one at a time with one book on transits, one entire book on progressions and everything like that. So yeah, this one also going in F tier. And then I also have volume five, which is synastry techniques. And again, it wasn't very helpful to me because by the time you get to this point in your astrological studies, you already know, you can already kind of determine the outcome of what you're seeing. You can determine the type of texture that it has. You don't need a book to tell you if you have the ruler of your seventh in your first. The most kind of basic interpretation of that is that the partner comes to you or you're kind of relationship orientated, something like that. You don't need a book to tell you some kind of convoluted technique that doesn't take into consideration the sign that it's in, if it rules another house at the same time. It was this one is probably better than the previous two, but it's still like an E or D tier book. There are so many better books on synastry. And then volume six is about four-area astrology, and this is actually from the 70s. I don't think they've republished this one, but I could be wrong. And I remember this one costs like quite a bit as well. And I don't know anything about horary astrology. This is the only book I have on it. And I've gone through it and I tried to do some of the exercises, but maybe horary astrology just doesn't click with me. But based on their other books that didn't particularly click with me either, I'm going to pass on this one. And I don't really want to rate it because, again, I don't know anything about horary astrology. I don't have anything to compare it to. So this one I can't rate, but based on other books that I've read from the same authors, I can imagine it wouldn't be great. No offense to them. Next up, I have Solar Arcs by Noel Till. And this is a big boy. This is very technical, very difficult. Like it's got these types of charts. I think it's a time search. And then you've also got, it involves so much math. It tells you how to kind of eyeball solar arcs. The solar arcs are essentially when the planets are moving at the exact same speed of the sun, which is about a degree every year until you're about 30, and then things change a little bit, and you do need software to kind of work this out. Oh yeah, look at that. Can you guys see that? They're not my notes, they're his. And yeah, this book is kind of, again, very technical. There's a lot of interviews in here. I'm not, I think he kind of, I don't want to say he invented solar arcs, but I could be wrong. But I think he was like the biggest kind of pioneer or a spokesperson for the solar directed technique. And there's a appendix at the back which kind of just gives you very basic interpretations of solar arcs, which are helpful, but it doesn't take into account, again, the natives' chart and what is going on in their chart with the planets involved in the solar arcs. So this one, if you can find it, I'd recommend it. I got this for, I think, $50, which was a pretty good price because I think this book's out of print and rare. So if you find it, pick it up. I doubt you'll make it through it. Not to discredit you or dishearten you. It's just I remember giving up about halfway because I don't really want to read about everybody's whole life story and how that relates to one kind of solar arc that they experienced at the time. You can kind of rely on your intuition to uh, decipher solar arcs in predictive analysis. Then we have The Contemporary Astrologer's Handbook by Sue Tompkins. Goated. This is the cookbook that you want instead of this one. Get this one, not this one. And as you can tell, this one is smaller, there's less information, this one is bigger. And I really like Sue Tompkins. I think she's my second favorite astrologer, or astrological author. And this one, it goes through everything like really in great detail. There's nothing about the sun sign she wrote. I remember in this book she says something about there being enough sun sign material out there, so she didn't want to cover it in this book. And I was grateful for that because I have books on sun signs. And if you're into astrology, you've been reading your zodiac for a long time, so you don't really need the sun sign interpretation. And yeah, she gets straight into it. She's talking about what even a natal chart is, because people kind of see that as their representation of their personality, which is true, but it's different facets of their personality. And it's um the natal chart is essentially just telling you the potentials of what can happen to you in your given circumstances and when they're triggered by certain progressions and transits and whatnot. And it's not just a person's personality. You're not just your aspects. You're all of those things and more when you factor in transits, progressions, solar arcs, things like that. And then it goes through. So she talks about that, and then she's talking about the elements, and then she's talking about each sign, and then she goes into each planet in really great detail, and then each planet in each sign. And there wasn't too much about the houses, but she goes into modalities, and it's really, really great. I think this one is out of print as well. I can't remember how much I paid for it. This is the most goated cookbook astrology book you can get. Sue Tompkins is a great author. This is going in S tier. And then I have The Love Relationship Formula by Christine Rakela. This is a book about synastry. Rare find. I think I got this on like a sale for like $20 from a secondhand bookstore. Sorry. I don't even know if you can find this online. I remember trying to find it for quite a while, and I never crossed paths with it. But this one is kind of, you know, there's a lot of great things in this book, but a lot of filler as well. It feels very I don't know how to explain it. It's not bad. There's great information in it, but so much of it just feels like her opinion, which makes sense because it's her book, but it's kind of, I just one thing I'll talk about this book is I remember her saying she'll talk about, Venus Mars aspects, for example, and she'll say they're very important in synastry, and of course they are. And then she says, idealistically, you're going to want the trine, the conjunction, or the sextile, and the square and opposition are like, you're not going to want them. As it's different depending on different people, and I find in my experience the trine and sextile between Venus and Mars in synastry, that's really good for like friendly relating. And I'm not saying it can't exist in couples either, but it's the hard aspects that make things happen. And there's more kind of like sexual tension, there's more of a sexual undertone if Mars and Venus are in hard aspect in synastry than if they're in an easy kind of aspect. And I don't really think she talks about that. She just, throughout this book, she constantly just reiterates that the soft aspects, so the sextile, the trine, sometimes the conjunction, are better than the hard aspects. And that kind of got on my nerves, I remember. She talks about the triplicity, so, the elements and the signs in those elements. And then she'll also break down Venus in all the signs, Mars in the signs. I can't remember if she covers the moon and the sun and things like that. I go back to this book when I want a kind of a refresh of like a more obscure kind of contact in synastry. So if someone has, let's say Uranus squaring someone else's Pluto, because most people are the same age when they're in a relationship or something like that. That's not something that comes up in synastry. But if someone is like an Aquarius rising and the partner's, Scorpio rising, and there is an age gap, and then I want to just double check something about that. She writes about that. So right here it's like Uranus Pluto involvement with the unusual, and then there'll be this paragraph of text about that big describing it. But again, this book is also really hard to navigate as well. You can't just, it's not in order, though she's going over one thing and then like green flag aspects and red flag aspects, but it's not green flag and then red flag. It's like green flag aspects, and she'll be talking about like a bunch of other things, and then red flag aspects are like towards the end of the book, and so you constantly got to go to the what's it called? Appendix, and the appendix isn't super helpful because it just kind of, puts you all over the place. And so I don't like the format of this book, and it's not cookbooky, but it's just not great for synastry, I think. There's really great things in here, like the green flags and the red flags, and I think that's kind of all you get out of it. Just a really different take, because it's not just her saying, Venus Mars contacts are important. She'll also say, Saturn Jupiter contacts are really important for, friendship ties and stability, because Saturn is kind of allowing Jupiter to go out and expand their mind, and Saturn's not going anywhere. And then Jupiter's also bringing back new information for Saturn. So again, when you become more advanced in astrology, something like that feels intuitive. But when you're just starting out, that can be like kind of a revelation for you. And so, yeah, The Love Relationship Formula by Christine Rakela is going to go in B or C tier. And then we have The Art of Stealing Fire, Uranus in the Horoscope by Liz Greene. I don't like Liz Greene. I have a lot of problems with Liz Greene, but this book, S tier. This is a really, really good book on Uranus and also Saturn, because there's like half, I want to say half the book, maybe not half, a little bit less than half of the book is dedicated just towards Saturn and the Saturn cycle. Because, Aquarius is co-ruled by Saturn. There's a lot of similarities between Uranus and Saturn sometimes. And I like that this book actually talks about Saturn and how it's different from Uranus. Liz Greene's books, I'll talk about her book on Saturn when I get to it, but all of the books that I have of hers are seminar style. So she recorded these seminars. I think this one's from maybe 1995, 1998. I could be wrong. It's from the 90s, I think. And then it's transcribed into text, and it reads like her talking for like maybe 10 pages, and then the class will kind of jump in and ask questions, and she'll try to answer them. And this one was really easy to read through. I've read it, I think, about 2 or 3 times at this point. It was easy to read. I didn't get bored. I didn't get pissed off with Liz Greene the same way I do in some of her other books. This book, yeah, S tier. It's a great book about Uranus. It's a great book about Saturn, the Saturn cycle, the Uranus cycle. Easy to read. I think I remember everyone asking really good questions in this book as well. I can't say that about her other books, but yeah, S tier. And another book by Liz Greene, Relationships and How to Survive Them. To be honest, I don't remember much about this book. Yeah, again, it's her book, it's her seminar, these are her opinions, so that's fine. I just find that they're not accurate. Again, this could just be a kind of like a generational gap between me and her and the students at the time, because again, this is probably from 1995 or 1996, 1998, something like that. And I feel like the stuff that they were concerned with back then just isn't really a concern for couples now. And half of this book is about composite charts. I'm not big on composite charts. It's again, I'm trying to be fair in my assessment, but by the time you get to composite charts, you should be competent enough with natal analysis that you can just apply the same interpretive techniques to the composite chart. You don't need a book or Liz Greene and her opinions to tell you like, oh, well, if you have the composite sun in the fifth house, it's going to be, super romantic. It's just half of the book is dedicated to composites. And again, I'm not big on composites. I also didn't find the information that accurate. It was very kind of just her agreeing with whatever the student said. And I've noticed this in a lot of her books. And that I think this is what put me off her the most. I think it was in her Apollo book, which I'll get out now because it's right here. I remember there was one thing I read that really put me off her like altogether. Someone asked a really good question in this Apollo's Chariot seminar. Someone asked a really good question, and she was just kind of like, "We just covered that," or like I just remember her like shutting them down and not expanding on what they were asking her to like clarify or something like that. And I remember getting like really pissed off reading because it was, in my opinion, it was a good question. It was something I would have liked further insight on. And she just kind of like brushed them off and was like, "We're not talking about that," or like, "Weren't you listening? Like, can't you, determine this based on what we were just talking about before?" And there was something about it just really put me off. Um, and I've noticed in her book, as I was saying, she just kind of she always picks people in the crowd because it will publicize their names a lot of the time. Like it'll just be like audience, or if they're talking about someone's specific chart, it will say their name, like if it's Sean or something. Um, and I've noticed that she always picks people with very like dominant, domineering personalities, and their charts reflect that as well. And they just kind of they're not even participating in any kind of discussion with the students or Liz Greene herself. They're just kind of like telling her, "This is what happened to me. Where is it in my chart? Oh, well, this also happened." And she's just kind of like agreeing with them, saying, "Yeah, well, that's because, you have Saturn square Chiron and da da da." And she's just kind of going along with whatever their version of events is. And I'm not saying like they're lying, but it's just her kind of agreeing with them. And then if there's someone, I'm assuming they're going to be a bit more quiet, a bit more demure or something like that. If they ask a question, she just kind of like brushes them off and refuses to elaborate on anything she was saying before. And that really kind of gets me because in my opinion, this is supposed to be like an open discussion with her and an audience, and they're paying to go to this seminar, and she's just kind of letting very dominant personalities kind of, take the reins of the entire discussion, and then leaving out more kind of introspective types. And as an introspective type, there was something about it just didn't sit right with me. And relationships and how to survive them. It's a book about synastry, and it's just kind of her opinions on synastry. I don't know. D tier. And then Apollo's Chariot. This is a book about the sun. There are a lot of cookbook astrology books about the sun, but not that many about the sun itself. It will kind of, the sun is kind of what everyone knows and understands to be their zodiac. And so when you're talking about the sun, you know that that's meant to be your personality. I interpret it as like the cardboard cutout of your personality and also the father. And in this book, she just goes into more detail about what the sun can represent, how the sun functions. And it's actually, it's pretty good for that. But yeah, I remember, I want to say probably the first third of the book is worth it. And then the rest of it, when it gets into discussions, it's just kind of that typical thing of her dismissing some questions and giving very baseline interpretations of certain celebrities' charts and things like that. So again, Art of Stealing Fire, S tier. Apollo's Chariot, C tier, maybe B tier. But yeah, I don't think there are many other books about the sun described in the same way that it is in this book. So maybe B tier. And then Aspects in Astrology by Sue Tompkins, another goated book. Sue Tompkins is the one that wrote this one, the Contemporary Astrologer's Handbook. I want to say you could probably get away with just these two books if you're getting into astrology. I don't think you actually need any of the other books that I've mentioned. But just pick up The Art of Stealing Fire if you can. But yeah, I think these books are all you need. So the Contemporary Astrologer's Handbook goes over, it mentions the aspects, but it doesn't go into, as far as I can remember, it doesn't go into Sun square Mars, Pluto opposite Venus. It's just talking about the planets, and then it'll talk about the square and how the square functions, the trine and how the trine functions, but it doesn't incorporate planetary analysis into that. But this book does, and this is just like this is probably the top of my S tier list. If I can be bothered to like make an edit, I probably won't be. But this essentially it goes through again. She starts off really well, explaining and going over what each planet represents again, and it's different material to the one that's in the Contemporary Astrologer's Handbook, as far as I can remember. And then she'll kind of go into the aspects and how they function. Again, it's different to the descriptions that are in the other book, and in more detail. And so in the Astrologer's Handbook one, there'll be, paragraphs like this big about the trine, the conjunction, stuff like that. Whereas in this book, it's pages dedicated to each aspect. And she does cover the quincunx as well, which is often overlooked by astrologers and people in the astrological community. I'm not I don't really look into it, but I do notice it if it's under a degree. And I will take it into account when I perform natal analysis. But anyways, she also gets onto, which I've never seen in another book, is she'll talk about the elements, the modalities and how they function together. So she'll talk about cardinal squares and she'll break down each square, the cardinal square between Aries and Cancer, the cardinal square between Cancer and Libra, Libra and Capricorn, Capricorn and Aries, and then she'll talk about the cardinal oppositions, and then she'll talk about the fixed squares and oppositions. And that is really, really helpful when you're learning astrology because when you think about a square between, like, Cancer and Libra, for example, you think of a square and you think that's difficult. It's a difficult aspect. There's tension there. But a square between, let's say someone has their sun in Cancer and their moon in Libra, just to keep it simple, that's very different than a cardinal square when someone has their sun in Aries and their moon in Capricorn. The sun in Cancer, moon in Libra square, that, and she breaks it down in this book, that is going to be, it's a cardinal square, but based on the qualities of the signs and the planets involved, the sun in Cancer is going to be more of a introspective expression of the sun, and the moon in Libra is going to be very kind of emotionally needy, but not in the Cancer kind of way. It's cooler. The moon in Libra is going to be more concerned with, social connection and intellectualizing emotions, whereas the sun is going to be more about being a caring person. And that is going to give rise to someone that can be emotionally needy, but in a more, what's the word? Someone that's more emotionally needy in a authentic type of way, and then can kind of intellectualize their emotions in another way. So it's someone that can be maybe kind of like the thing that's coming to mind is something like off kilter. I know Ariana Grande has this square, and it's, people kind of look at her and they don't understand her deal. They don't know how you can be so kind of emotionally moody all the time. And then, or that's kind of, your personality is very kind of like Cancer, moody, always kind of sulking in some kind of way, always kind of the victim. And then the emotions are kind of, intellectualized, and the need for partnership is always there. And so that can, I don't want to say a weak personality, but can have, give rise to a personality that is kind of more dependent and weak and less likely to go out there on their own because they're so dependent on acceptance from others with the moon in Libra. But then if you have the sun in Aries and the moon in Capricorn, that's just someone with a lot of kind of grit to the personality. The sun in Aries is going to be bold and daring, and the moon in Capricorn is going to be very self-contained. This is someone that is not going to get, kind of ruffled with the wind that's blowing in each direction. They're just kind of, steadfast in their personality, whereas, the Cancer Libra square is someone that is more dependent, sensitive, and things like that. And so when she goes through, each of the, each of the modalities like that, and the squares and the oppositions, it really, I remember it really deepening my kind of interpretation of certain squares and oppositions. And that's really great. And then she'll go through, it isn't a cookbook in the sense that she's talking about, you know, Sun Moon square, Sun Moon opposition, Sun Moon trine. There'll be a whole chapter dedicated to Sun Moon contacts and just paragraphs and paragraphs of text, and then it's up to you to determine, oh, what she's describing here is probably going to be applicable to someone with a hard aspect, being the square, the opposition, and maybe the conjunction. And it's the same with any other planet as well. It's up to you to determine, this sounds like something that would happen when someone has a hard aspect versus a soft aspect. And she just covers every combination up until, I think, Mars Neptune. No, Mars Pluto, sorry. And then it will be aspects between the outer planets. Yeah, this is, as, in my opinion, as S tier as you can get, and these two together, I think that this is all you're gonna need if you're starting out in astrology. And then we also have Exploring Jupiter by Stephen Arroyo. I think this was the last astrology book I ever read. I've kind of taken a hiatus on astrology books because I feel confident in the knowledge that I have, and that I don't really need to gather more information right now. I feel like I'm doing that in my practice. This book, again, it was fine. I liked it. It was easy to read. It just kind of goes through, what is Jupiter? What does it represent? What does Jupiter represent in each element, in each sign? Uh, I'm not saying I don't like when they use chart examples. I think that's fine. It's just when they use chart examples of, in my opinion, ancient figures, I just get put off by it. Like, or even kind of like abstract figures. Um, because I don't know anything about them and they try to explain to you like who this person was and what they did. A lot of the time with this book in particular and probably many others, it just feels like he was grasping at straws. Like he will kind of he'll talk about, the Jupiterian personality. Obviously someone with the sun in Sagittarius conjunct Jupiter um in the first house. That's obviously a very Jupiterian personality, but then he'll also describe Jupiterian personality as someone with like the moon in, yeah, I don't know, Leo trine Jupiter in Aries. And I just think, is that a Jupiterian personality or is that just someone with their moon trine Jupiter? Am I myself a Jupiterian personality? I have my chart ruler squaring Jupiter and Jupiter's in Pisces and it's leaning into my 12th house. Does that mean I'm a Jupiterian personality? Or like, especially if you have a strong Saturn like me, it's just kind of, uh, yeah, I feel like a lot of what he says can kind of be applied to anyone. It's very general in a lot of ways. And he does go over, Sun, Jupiter interchanges, Moon, Jupiter interchanges. And again, it's not a bad book. I want to say this book cost me 50 or $60 and it's just a normal kind of novel-sized book. And I don't think I actually got any new information from it. Half of the book is probably just chart examples, which in my opinion, they're pretty boring to read, especially when we're talking about Conrad Ardenor and Walter Mondale and Ringo Starr. Okay, Ringo Starr I can get behind. Who else is there? Um, just these kind of figures that just kind of I don't know who they are. Um, maybe that speaks more to my ignorance, but Arthur Scheisinger, I think I know that name. Um, Francisco Franco, like I don't know who these people are. How can I really understand the chart examples if I don't know anything about these people and only what you're telling me, and then you weave the quincunx into the analysis, and it's kind of again very general. Not a bad book, not great. C tier, I guess. And you'll see that a lot in Liz Greene's chart as well. She'll use um chart examples of random kind of celebrities and politicians that aren't actually popular. Again, maybe for at the time they were very um prominent figures, but for maybe people in my generation, I don't know who they are. I've never heard of these people before, and they're just not great picks. Uh, Linda Goodman's Sun Signs. Again, this is probably something a lot of you have or have received as a gift. Um, I like this book. I think this is a really great interpretation of the sun through each sign, and it's not just the sun in each sign. It's, the sun in each sign for a child, for a woman, for an employee, for a man, for a boss. Um, and that's really interesting. You don't really get those types of interpretations, and it doesn't go through the houses, but the way it's written is very kind of poetic. Um, really easy to read. I remember reading this in like a few days on vacation, just like going through the entire book. This is a book that kind of I don't want to say got me into astrology because I was interested in it before that, but reading this on vacation, I was just kind of like, damn, I got to learn more about astrology. I got to take it seriously. So this book will kind of always have a very special place in my heart because of that. And yeah, I think this is a good idea to just kind of have. And I know for me, because like the sun in Pisces, for example, that can be really hard to kind of get your head around when you're getting into astrology because each Pisces is kind of different from every other Pisces, but also very similar in other ways. And it's very healthy to attribute the unhealthy. I mean, wait, what did I say? It's very common to attribute the unhealthy side of Pisces to every Pisces sun because a lot of Pisces suns are more um, low vibrational expression of Pisces than the high vibration ones. But this talks about that. This will go into, the lower vibration of Pisces suns in a female and then, the high vibration. And yeah, it's a nice read. It's written like poetry. It's not kind of talking about cut and dry things. It's more you get more of a gray area. You get to interpret it in the way that you want. Each one has a poem as well, like an actual poem or some kind of script from a movie or a novel. Yeah, really, really beautiful. This is probably gonna go in. Yeah, maybe I'll give it a B tier, maybe even an A tier. Because yeah, there's not that many books that approach the sun like that. Um, Through the Looking Glass by Richard Idemon. This is my favorite astrology book. This isn't as helpful as the Sue Tompkins Aspects in Astrology book. This one. These two are going to go together, but this one is more um, interpretive. This is kind of telling you what to expect when you have certain planets coming into contact with each other. This one is just talking about this is the best synastry book I've ever read in my life. I don't think anything will ever get better than this. This kind of just again, this I think this is more about my taste than maybe what you're into. And again, this is kind of the seminar style uh writing like the Liz Greene one, except I actually like this guy, and these guys were actually friends. Him and Liz Greene were friends, as if my memory serves me correct. But yeah, Liz Greene, I don't like her way of speaking. I don't like the type of charts she chooses to focus on. This guy, like, I mean, he died in like the 80s. He seems super charismatic, and he doesn't treat anyone like they're dumb. If someone even asks like a dumb question, he treats it with a lot of respect and a lot of grace. And this book, it just talks about uh you know it's through the looking glass, a search for the self in the mirror of relationships. And this isn't talking about Venus Mars contacts and Moon Mars contacts. I think it might cover things like that scattered throughout the book when they come up in conversation, because again, this is a seminar style text. But there was something about this book that really kind of made everything very cohesive for me when I started learning about synastry. Because it's so easy to fall back on, the cookbook interpretations of certain synastry aspects, whereas this one is talking more about, taking a step back. And this is a book that also taught me how to really analyze a chart and how to focus on what is important to someone. And yeah, so this is just S tier, less appropriate for a beginner, more appropriate for someone interested in synastry that doesn't mind, something like he talks about a lot, like Greek mythology. Someone that doesn't mind. It's a very kind of Jupiterian book. It really does expand your consciousness of synastry. And I remember him giving decent examples, or like even people I didn't know that he was talking about, the way he would describe them. It made me feel like I knew those people, like The Art of Synastry, comparing the charts of Zelda and F. Scott Fitzgerald. I don't know who these people are, but I remember reading this and really getting an understanding of their personalities and the synastry between them, less like in the Liz Greene book or the Stephen Arroyo book, where he would kind of just talk about one thing about them and one thing about their chart, and it felt like grasping at straws. This was very kind of um intensive, cohesive, easy to read. I read this, I think, in one sitting. I've read it probably 5 times at this point. Yeah, S tier. Healing Pluto Problems by Donna Cunningham. Not for everyone. I really liked it. Again, am I a Jupiterian person, or am I a Saturnian person? Am I a Plutonian? Based on the book, I think I lean more Plutonian than I want to admit, than I come across. I Nothing in this book shook me. There is a trigger warning, I think, at the start, like talking about like, oh, we're gonna get into, really heavy stuff in this book. Don't read it if you can't handle it. Um, and I read it and I thought, this is stuff that happens to people all the time. Um, Maybe I am just a Plutonian. She would talk about, I think this is a reissue, and she would talk about people sending her letters saying that they couldn't get through the book, that they had a mental breakdown because of things written in the book. In my opinion, there was nothing that dark written about it. Terrible shit happens to people all the time. I'm not really affected by it. Obviously, I don't like it happening, but it was just kind of, we'll talk about the abuse of children, but yeah, it's not in like graphic detail or anything. It was just kind of someone's experience growing up with two parents that were very obviously like sociopathic, some kind of, stuck in a cycle of trauma, things like that. But this does cover Pluto through the houses quite intensively, which is kind of, you don't get that in many kind of cookbooks. They kind of just talk about Pluto very generally through each house. They barely touch on Pluto through the signs. This one does touch on Pluto through, again, it focuses on the fucking boomers. The boomers, the Pluto and Leo generation, they get everything. Every book I pretty much have focuses on Pluto and Leo because they came out around that time where boomers were in their 30s, 40s, 50s, dominating, the kind of zeitgeist of astrology at the time. So everything was about them. I don't think in this book she touches on, Pluto and Sagittarius, which is my generation. She does touch on Pluto and Scorpio a little bit. But yeah, Pluto through the houses, and then we'll talk about um yeah, the issues that Pluto people face. And if you are a Plutonian, this book will get you through any tough time you're going through. If you're not Plutonian, I don't want to say there's nothing for you in this book, but I don't think you'd get it. And I'm not saying that in like a gatekeepy way. It's just I don't think it's for you if you're not interested in Pluto, if you're not a Plutonian yourself. It's just if you get it, you get it, and if you don't, you're not going to get it. And you probably hate it. And it'll talk about, Pluto to each planet. Um, why does Pluto hurt so much? Why did this Plutonian person hurt you? Just whatever. Like again, like even just talking about, I'm getting a bit choked up from the like not even just the bad stuff in the book, but also just the healing properties in this book. She does focus on I want to call them like flower essences a lot, and I'm not knocking it, but I just remember like at the end of every chapter she'll talk about, you should buy, this essence of this flower, and that will help with this issue. Obviously helpful to some, but I remember it kind of being a little bit out of place in the book. I'm not saying it shouldn't be here, but this is the type of book that has kind of like a witchy, not witchy, but like I don't want to say paganistic, but it's just again, and it is a therapy book. Like I'm just skimming through it now. It's like she has a mini chapter called The Litmus Test for Guilt, and things to ask yourself if you're feeling guilty, and is this person trying to manipulate you, or do you actually deserve to feel guilty about this thing that happened to you? Um, yeah, S tier or A tier. If you're not Plutonian, this is probably going to be a C tier or D tier book. Um, man, I kind of want to read it again. I like that book a lot. Um, Predictive Astrology by Bernadette Brady. This one, again, you need a kind of foundational understanding of transits and how they work. She does cover them, but I remember this was the book that I tried to teach myself transits with before I got any kind of professional training in transits. And I, she kind of starts off. You're thrown in the deep end with this one. You really are. You're thrown in the deep end. You kind of get it. You kind of don't. Uh, the more you read of it, the more convoluted it kind of gets. She introduces something called um transit charts. What are they called? I can't remember. It's like a matrix where you go through a transit and you'll kind of write down the planet and the house that it's in and what it's aspecting, and then you kind of interpret the transit that way instead of just kind of intuitively and based on what else you can see happening at the same time in someone's predictive cycles. Again, it can get kind of technical. There's like graphs. She talks about the eclipse cycle, which again, there's nothing really about eclipses in this book up till this point, and then you're kind of thrown in the deep end with the eclipse cycle. And then she also has these things, which I think is like a time search that you're meant to do manually. Again, this book's probably from the 70s or the 80s. It's a good book, but you need some kind of understanding of transits, or you need some kind of what's the word? Instruction from a professional astrologer in transits to help you out with this book. I don't think this is a book you can kind of give to a beginner learning transits or astrology. You need to have some kind of assistance with this book. It's a tough book, but there is really good information in here. Um, but yeah, I think this book took me about 3 times. I had to read through it 3 times to really understand what she's talking about. And even then, the matrix chart for me, it just didn't make sense. I don't know why I would interpret a transit that way. It's kind of it might be helpful as an exercise, but it made things harder for me. I remember the matrix chart really throwing me off. But yeah, this would probably go in like maybe A tier, I think. It's a good book, just not particularly easy for someone starting out. But if you have some kind of understanding of transits, then give it a go. And then we have The Art of Predictive Astrology by Carol Rushman. Again, it's so goated. This is probably the only book, and I said before, like you need to learn like transit separately and then progression separately and everything like that, instead of all kind of being condensed into one book. I don't know how she did it. This book actually makes sense. Obviously, get this book along with separate books about transits, progressions, and everything. But this book, I read it in one sitting. It all made sense to me. Um, I think this is one of the most easy astrology books I've ever read, along with the Richard Idemon stuff. But that is kind of is very dialogue heavy because it is in the sense of him talking to students and in a seminar kind of setting. You're meant to listen to that. Whereas this one is an actual book. There's no seminar involved, and yet it's so easy to read and it's laid out very um, cohesively. It's laid out in a way that it all flows together. I feel like I can't even, there's nothing I can say about this book that gives it any kind of justice. It is just the best book on predictive astrology, including it focuses on transits and progressions. I think I want to say mostly on progressions because she does go through, the moon through each, sign and the progressed moon through each sign, the progressed sun, then talking about how to kind of overlay progressions with transits. And she also talks about progressed house cusps, which you don't really hear other people talking about. I mean, they do, but they don't explain it in a way that makes sense. And um, yeah, this was just, and she uses a lot of her personal experience as well, which I really like because unlike in the other books that I've mentioned, where they use the charts of these figures that some of them are kind of like very ancient or irrelevant at the time of reading, she talks about her own life and she says, this is what happened, and this is what was happening astrologically for me, and this is how it relates. And that's very helpful. And a lot of astrologers, they might actually be more secretive than they let on. They're fine talking about other people's astrology, but they don't want to talk about their own. Um, yeah, this is again S tier. This is as good as you're gonna get. This is good for a beginner as well. This is not gonna get them lost. This is going to, it might be a bit difficult for them to understand at first, but then on a second read or a third read, and even something just relating back to if they get stuck on something, it's so great. There's nothing I can say to praise this book enough. It helped me a lot in my understanding because I remember I tried to read this one first and I read it. I was kind of like, well, now I'm just confused. Now I'm just pissed off because I don't really understand it. And then I remember reading this one and it was like I skimmed through it so easily. And then I went back to this one and things started to make more sense. So yeah. Chiron in Love, The Astrology of Envy, Rage, Compassion, and Wisdom by Liz Greene. Flop. Chiron is kind of, I look at Chiron and I apply it to whatever interpretation I get from Saturn and Pluto and maybe like hard aspects to the moon. Chiron just reiterates things that are already in the chart. Like, for example, in my chart, I have Venus opposite Pluto. Venus rules my seventh house. So there's some kind of Plutonian undercurrent to all of my relationships. And because it's an opposition and it's a hard aspect, it's going to be the shadow side of Pluto and Venus coming out. There are issues regarding control, fusion, finances, especially because I have Venus in the second house and Pluto in the eighth. Those are all Venus Pluto things, okay? And then I also have Chiron in Scorpio in my seventh house. That is just compounding on the Venus Pluto opposition that I already have in my chart. Chiron moves. I think it takes 52 years to make a cycle. So pretty much everyone born around the same time as me is gonna have no, literally everyone born around the same time as me is going to have Chiron and Scorpio, but in a different house based on when they were born. But for me, it just kind of compounds the Venus Pluto thing in my chart. Um, Venus opposite Pluto in the configuration in my chart, Chiron and Scorpio on the seventh, they're saying the same thing. And you see this time and time again in other people's charts. They'll have Chiron in a certain sign in a certain house, and then they'll also have probably something to do with Venus aspecting the ruler of the sign that Chiron is in, or they'll have some kind of, moon aspect that kind of, you know, reiterates whatever Chiron is saying. And again, with this book, I think I read through it in a day. I think the text in this book is bigger than the text in her other books as well. She touches on Chiron and synastry. Is Chiron and synastry really important if there's like no hard Saturn aspects? she'll talk about, people, and I'm not saying she's wrong, and I'm not saying don't look at Chiron. It's just that, I remember her in this book talking about, oh, well, in a domestic violence situation, they might have, hard Saturn Mars contacts, but oh, they have Venus trying each other's Chiron. That means that they're helping each other in this soul evolution of theirs. And I just think, okay, but they might also have, easy, Venus, moon, sun things. They might have, their ascendant sextiling the other's ascendant. It's just why she would go to Chiron to explain certain things, why any astrologer would go straight to Chiron to explain certain things instead of just the kind of meat and potatoes of the natal chart. I won't know, and I don't know if this is just something they're interested in and they find it easier to interpret it that way. Again, it's totally valid. Um, why would I need to put so much stock into Chiron, an asteroid that takes 52 years to cycle through each of the signs, that may or may not be making an aspect to certain planets in the chart, when I can just look at the planets that are in aspect and just use Chiron as a cherry on top of that. This is just my opinion, but this book, it was kind of very lackluster. I don't remember learning anything useful about Chiron in this book apart from what Chiron is, which is an asteroid, and that it represents a wounded healer. And people kind of say, you're meant to heal your Chiron. I was always under the impression that Chiron is the wound that never heals, and it's something you're always going to have to live with and accept in your chart. And that, I think she does kind of say that in this book as well. She's like, your Chiron rune will never heal. So kind of get that idea out of your head. This is something that you're just going to have to live with. And there are certain things in your chart that you can use to make the experience less painful. But it's always going to be there. And that's kind of how I thought of Chiron anyways. I don't even want to rate it because it was such a nothing burger. Joni Patry, Eastern Astrology for Western Minds. I got this book because I wanted to learn more about nodes. Um, I feel like Western astrology kind of gets the nodes wrong, and I don't know if it's because of the more intellectual approach to astrology that a lot of Westerners have, in the sense that it's more the psychological approach. It's more about free choice. It's more about, well, the nodes are kind of taking you towards your destiny. Um, Whereas the Eastern approach is literally like, the nodes are gonna like kill you. The nodes are the thing that's gonna kill you. The North Node is like this insatiable point in your chart. You get greedy for it. Things conjunct the North Node are just insane. If you have the Sun conjunct the North Node, you're a fucking egomaniac. If you have the Moon conjunct the North Node, like, you're mentally unstable. And a Western astrology book isn't gonna say that, even if it is kind of true. And that's why I got this book, because I wanted to know more about the Eastern approach to the nodes, because I feel like Western astrologers are scared of the nodes. They're malefic in Eastern astrology, and yet in Western astrology, they're very kind of like new agey, kind of rose quartzy. They're just kind of like, kind of very bohemian. And I never got that understanding looking at the nodes in my own practice and in my own studies. It always felt like the nodes were kind of malefic in nature. And this book covers the nodes and gave me a lot of great information about the nodes. Also a bunch of other stuff about Eastern astrology. She'll talk about, there is a huge language barrier as well, because a lot of this is in, I think it's Sanskrit. She'll be talking about, the houses, Thanu Bhava, Dana Bhava, Sahaja Bhava, Sukha Bhava. And it's obviously, if you sit down with the book and you like really study it and you memorize these things, and you probably have some kind of, instruction from a Vedic astrologer, it would be more beneficial to you. But she'll also talk about, kind of very intuitive approaches to astrology as well, in the sense that if you have, hypothetically, you have Mars in Aries, and then you also have Saturn in Gemini, and then you have Venus in Taurus, squished in between those two planets. It's like, yeah, maybe that Venus has a harder time than most Venuses in Taurus, just because you have both of the malefics, Mars and Saturn, on either side of it. That's kind of like, you can see that on the chart as well, like the Western wheel chart. You can see that, and maybe there is some kind of like subconscious approach to seeing that, where there is this kind of understanding of this Venus is having a harder time than it needs to, just because of where Mars and Saturn is. And she talks about stuff like that, and how that is kind of like a normal thing in Vedic astrology to take into consideration if there are planets sitting between the two malefics. And then she'll also talk about, I forget what it's called, I think they're called yogas, which is like if you have the ruler of the fifth in the ninth, and the ruler of the ninth in the first, and things like that. I don't remember the exact terminology for it, but it was like, if you have the ruler of the fifth and the ninth, that's a great place for the ruler of the fifth, even if it's a malefic, yeah, things like that. So that gets very convoluted for me. I've only read this book once, and I don't want to say I didn't enjoy that. It was just something I wouldn't focus on personally, with my astrological practice. But again, is it even applicable in Western astrology or only Vedic astrology? There was some, yeah, intuitive information in this that I think I started to apply in my own practice. If it's just kind of somewhere in my brain, yeah, I'll give this book, yeah, probably like B tier or A tier. I don't really know any other books about Eastern astrology that are in English for Western astrologers. So this might be the only one. I don't know. Let me know. But yeah, it was a good book. A tier. Between Astrologers and Clients by Bob Mulligan. This is, I think, the only book I have on, um, not therapeutic astrology because the Pluto book was really great for that, but counseling. And this one was, it was fine. I don't want to say it was bad. There was plenty of things he covered that I wouldn't expect him to, like, but how much of this is common sense, I don't know. He'll just talk about, pricing and if you're seeing clients in person, where you're supposed to seat them, make sure you as the astrologer, you can kind of like have an exit point to get out if someone's acting weird. This was his based on his experience as an astrologer. And I think this is written in like the 80s or the 90s, so a lot of this is probably going to be outdated. Like I think he talks about like taking credit card payments over the phone. Obviously, people don't do that anymore. Faxing clients things. It was fine. Again, this is a smallish kind of book as well, and it cost me probably about 50 or $60. I am in Australia, so that could factor into it as well. Um, Again, it wasn't terrible. It wasn't great. I wouldn't recommend it, but how many other books are still in print that you can get about counseling clients about astrology? I mean, I would give it C tier, but if this is the only book you can get, maybe it gets bumped up to B tier, but I think C tier. When Will You Marry by Rose Murray. This is like again, it's one of those super 90s books, like the Love Formula book. It's super 90s in its aesthetics. This one it gets really convoluted in some certain aspects. Just talking about it talks about converse progressions as well, which again I don't want to say aren't valid. It's just that why would I need to look at converse progressions if I already have progressions and the transits and the solar arcs and yeah. So good information in here talking about it's good for beginners in the sense if you're getting into synastry, what someone might be looking for in a partner. So, for example, I have Libra on my seventh house cusp, and this book would cover what it means to have Libra on the seventh house, ruling the seventh house, what it means to have Venus ruling the seventh house, so Libra or Taurus on the seventh house, what it means to have Venus placed in a certain house in your chart, what that says about your love nature, what that might say about your potential partner. Very kind of general in that sense, but it goes a little bit deeper than you would get in a cookbook astrology book about synastry. Um, and again, she kind of goes through, in my opinion, there is some kind of cherry picking stuff in here. Um, just about celebrity charts examples. But I think it's a good book. I've read this probably like 4 times, and I think I refer back to it. I might put this in B tier. It's pretty solid, but not great. But there's decent information in here. I think it's out of print, probably hard to find. If you can find it, pick it up. But I don't think you should go out of your way hunting this book down. Composite Charts by John Townley. Again, I'm not huge on composite charts, but I think this is the go-to composite chart handbook. And this will just talk about Sun sextile Pluto in the composite chart. The composite North Node conjunctly ascendant. Yeah, very cookbooky. How applicable it is, I'm not really sure because I don't really bother to look at the composite charts like super in depth. I feel like the composite chart, if anything, it's a very kind of broad snapshot of the relationship. But transits to the composite chart, progressions to the composite chart, I think that's where the real gold is in the composite charts. Like you'll see changes to the couple themselves based on their natal chart, and if something similar is also reflected in the composite chart, then it gives more validity to the prediction you're about to make. But regarding the relationship itself, synastry tells you about the dynamics between two people, whereas the composite chart is the relationship and it can explain certain things, but I don't think you need a whole guidebook to give you a dissertation on how to interpret things. It's very intuitive once you get comfortable with natal analysis. And also you can apply the composite chart. You can do that in synastry with the natives chart as well and see if the composite sun is conjunct one of the natives, Venus, for example. That would obviously mean that they experience the relationship maybe more fulfilling than the person that doesn't have that aspect. It's just stuff like that. Is again, once you become more advanced, it becomes very intuitive. Do you need a whole book on composite charts? If you're really into it, then sure, pick this one up. This one probably cost me about $50, but it's big, and I think it's still in print, or that it's common enough that I know people that also have this book. So I'd put this in, yeah, B tier. Linda Goodman Love Signs. This is similar to Sun Signs, but she covers the sun sign compatibility between, I think it's men, it'd be just men and women. I think just men and women. It'll be hypothetically, me and my husband, for example, he's a Taurus, I'm a Cancer. It will say the Taurus Cancer relationship, and then there'll be 10 pages about that in general. And then she'll do the Taurus Sun man and the Cancer Sun woman, and then a whole nother chapter dedicated to that. And then she'll also do the Cancer Sun man and the Taurus Sun woman and how that's different. And she does that through every couple. This is also, I remember there being a lot of like numerology in this book. So I don't remember exactly how it functions, but if you both have the same sun sign, for example, two Aries in a relationship, it's like a 1-1. It's like a 1-1 numerology thing. And she applies numerology to that, and that works like a conjunction. And then if you have Sun in Aries square, Sun in Capricorn, that I think again I could be wrong with the math here, but it's something like that's a 1-4. It's something like that, and it correlates to the square. And so the tension of the square is interpreted in the compatibility between the sun signs. But then if you have Sun in Aries in a relationship with the Sun in Scorpio, that's like a 1-7 or something, whatever it is. And that relates to the quincunx. And that's how this plays out in the relationship. And it's something like, I remember it throwing me off because a lot of the time with these books, you kind of just want to jump to your sun sign with your partner sun sign, whatever. And you don't really read the foreword. I, of course, read the foreword, but I just remember it throwing me off. And I don't remember reading anything inaccurate in this book, but it is kind of a bit more gifty, gimmicky, not bad, not great, but fun. And again, it gives you more depth and understanding to the sun signs and how important the sun can actually be in the native chart and in synastry as well. Yeah, I'll give this one A tier. Again, it's huge. There's heaps of great information in here as well. Um, and then we have When Stars Collide by Paul Westran, and he also lives in Perth. I opened this book, and after the foreword, he like writes his name, and then he's like Perth, Western Australia. And I emailed him, and I said, "Oh my God, I got your book. I'm really enjoying it." And then he emailed me back, and he was really nice to me. This book is like, I loved it, and I don't have anything bad to say about it, but it's not going to be for everyone. I don't want to sit here and say like I'm so intelligent and because I look at the facts and the data, but this is a really data heavy book, and I like data, but I also like just the artistic genius that you need to, I'm not saying I'm a genius, but the artistic kind of finesse you need to interpret natal charts. I like them. I like both approaches, the intuitive understanding and even kind of the psychic understanding. But also when you look at it from a as pure data, that's also really valid. And this book talks about, okay, so it's When the Stars Collide by Paul Westran, why we love, who we love, and when we love them. And this book essentially just breaks down a bunch of celebrity couples you don't really need to know about their personalities, because again, it's all data. And he does go through, having, I think it's the sun, the moon, Venus, and Mars through all the signs, and the basic kind of personality that entails in someone, and what that person needs, what they want, things like that. But then he'll talk about how important it is to look at. So this kind of disregards natal synastry, and it talks about progressed charts to progressed charts and the synastry that way, and progressed charts to natal charts. And I've been keeping tabs in my own relationships of when I met people and when relationships fell apart and when we reconciled, and it correlates. And so he'll talk about I think he focuses on the Sun, Venus, and Mars. And so if there is no connection, I didn't have any connections with him because I went through it. Um, I didn't have any connections with Paul Westran, so there was no chance of us having any kind of relationship. I think this is only romantic, but I can assume this will apply to professional relationships as well. If you don't have your progressed or natal sun in aspect to their sun, moon, Venus, natal or progressed, there's no relationship, and that applies to Venus and Mars as well. And you'll notice when you get into a relationship with someone, for example, me and my best friend, when this is just off the top of my head, and I'm sure I'm going to miss something, but when we met, we had both of our, I think I had my progressed Mars, no, or her progressed Mars was square my natal Mars, which it creates the possibility for a relationship to occur, but the quality of that relationship is going to be more combative. A Mars square, that's combative. And that's kind of how our relationship was for the time we were friends the first time. She had some issues going on, but like we were friends, but there was this real kind of like sibling rivalry between us. And then the second time, we kind of reconciled. There was no Mars square anymore, but there was something else, like maybe a sun, her progressed sun was trying my Venus, something like that. And it was a more kind of gentle, steady relationship. And there are he goes through, and there's matrix charts in this one, and I think they're great. Um, you know, I mean, very convoluted upon, first reading. Blah. Very convoluted, but once you get the hang of it, it makes sense. And then he'll talk about how this is the period where someone um can fall in love with another person during that black box, and this is obviously the climax. Chances are that's going to be when someone gets married, and then they'll break up around here. And he goes through it all, and it all correlates with what he's saying. Very data heavy book, not for everyone. Um, it takes a lot to kind of understand what he's saying from the data perspective. Like you need to get your eyes adjusted to the graphs and everything like that. If you're not interested in that kind of scientific approach, skip this book. If you are interested in synastry and predicting things, and let's say you have two people or one person that says they're in love with another person, they want to know when they get married, and there's decent enough synastry or something, but you're not seeing any connections between their natal and progressed charts, one person's natal chart to the other progressed, or both people's progressed charts to the other person's. Very convoluted, I know. Um, if there's no connection there, there's not going to be a relationship. And he goes through that in depth, the whole book. So and I don't think anyone has ever written a book about this. Um, yeah, timing of synastry. S tier, A tier, S tier, S tier for me, maybe B tier for most people. Patterns of the Past by Judy Hall. This one, again, I don't want to say it's bad because it isn't bad. It comes along with, I don't want to say it comes along, you need to buy them separately. Karmic Connections. I think this one might be a little bit more popular because it's a synastry book. But these two, again, probably cost me $50 each. They have the same information inside. Like half of this book, I think this is the second one, half of this book is just half of this book. I remember reading the same information twice and wasn't happy about that because I didn't know where I could skip to, but I'd be reading something and be like, I've read this before. So Patterns of the Past, this talks about karma in the natal chart, which I'm not discrediting it. I believe it, but how much of it is just grasping at straws? And again, I remember her talking a lot about Chiron, the karma around Chiron in synastry. Whereas in my opinion, based on what I know, karma is going to talk more about the nodes, Saturn and Pluto, than just Chiron. Like, do you know what I mean? I don't want to say this book is bad. It's like the other books that I've mentioned where they're very convoluted. Like the what was the title? Love Relationship Formula. How it's not linear. You can't really read it and be like, oh, okay, okay, and then it kind of the material kind of like expands and then contracts towards the end and goes through some kind of conclusion. It isn't like that. It's like you're thrown into the deep end, and you're getting thrashed around in like a whirlpool because it's just pulling you from one topic over here, and then it'll start talking about something else. And if you want to go back to something you remember reading in these books, you don't really know where to find it, because it could be anywhere. It could be buried in a text about, Mars, Saturn, Pluto contacts, or it could just be talking about in the chapter about Pluto. Like it's one of those books where to find it's hard to kind of go back to where you were, where you read something in this book. It's hard to kind of find that information again. Um, is there a glossary thing? Yes, there is, but again, it's like each kind of word in the appendix has like five different pages, have five different numbers after it. So it could be any one of those things. Um, and yeah, it's just I again, it's not bad. It just wasn't great. I remember this one. I read this one second because I was more excited to get to the Sinistry one. If you're gonna get one of them, I from memory, get this one. But and I don't want to say like don't get these books because there's nothing useful in them, because I think this is the only book I have that talks about karma in this way. There was one thing that was really fascinating to me, I remember, was talking about like personal karma. You can have personal karma, which is something from your past life you brought into this life. And I remember her saying something like fixed squares, like these fixed squares, these issues that you have between the planets in fixed squares, they have like accumulated over lifetimes and lifetimes and lifetimes of not addressing that issue. So they become fixed squares. Whereas a mutable square is like, if you don't sort this out now or in the next lifetime, this is going to become a fixed square. And it's going to be, a major point, a sore point in your chart. Um, and I thought that was really interesting because, again, that makes sense from a very kind of intuitive perspective. Like the fixed squares are going to be tougher to deal with, quote unquote, than a mutable square or a cardinal square. Um, so yeah, stuff like that was really interesting. And then she'll talk about personal karma, which is like the fixed square stuff. And then she'll also talk about like relationship karma, which is kind of, you see that in Sinistry. And then there's also like racial karma. And then there's like group karma, and group karma overrides any racial karma in the chart. And then there's collective karma, which overrides any group karma. And I assume like, group karma might be wrong place, wrong time. But when at least something like like Columbine, for example, all the kids that died during that, they probably had some kind of group karma. And then there's some kind of larger collective karma for every student at that school. And again, when I say it like that, it sounds kind of you're grasping at straws. But you need to remember, like something like that, where they're all kind of the same age, maybe there is something there. But yeah, there was something I got kind of like overwhelmed by certain karma overrides other karma, because then it's like, well, do you really need to kind of focus on like personal karma if someone's just going to get wiped out in like a terrorist attack because of some kind of group karma that they have that they didn't even know, or like any other astrologer might not even see. So there was this stuff like that was interesting but very convoluted. And then yeah, I remember in the Karmic Connections ones just talking about personal aspects you have in your chart and how that is going to affect any kind of relationship you get into. So it talks about um like difficult configurations in the natal chart, how that is going to affect any kind of relationship you get in, because it's affecting you on a personal level, but then also what happens when you have certain synastry with certain other people, and if it's karmic and if it's not, and things like that. So this one I think is more informative, and again, half of each book is in the other book, so whatever. Karmic Connections, I mean, this one, what did I say this one was? Like C tier. I would say C or D tier. This one, C or B tier. Linda Goodman, Relationship Signs. This one's similar to the love relationship formula. It's just half of this book is a table, like ephemeris kind of thing, of people's birth, because I guess this is before people had computers. So there's only about this much information in the actual book, and the rest is just data. But yeah, this would just talk about having Mars conjunct someone else's Mars, conjunct their sun, square their sun, opposite their sun. But I don't think it's super accurate, because if you're looking at synastry without looking at the natives' charts, I mean, I don't want to like get into it too much because I have another video that describes synastry in detail and how you're supposed to kind of interpret, not supposed to, how it's recommended you interpret it if you want the best interpretation. Instead of just saying, oh, you have Venus oppose or square Mars. And then, like in the love relationship formula book, she's like, that's bad. And in this book, she's like, that's bad. I don't think it's that bad. It's going to give more energy to the relationship on a sexual kind of level. There's going to be more creativity as well. The soft aspects are good for friendly relating, and it will feel like, um, if you're someone that can't handle conflict in a relationship, you probably will prefer the sextile or the trine between Venus and Mars in synastry. But the conjunction, square, and opposition, that's going to be better than no connection at all. And it's going to cause problems because it's an opposition or a square. But if you have other aspects in the chart that are very supportive, and this is the only kind of really loud, difficult, hard aspect, there might be something going on with the one of the partners might feel too kind of what's the word, like sexualized, too pursued, something something like that. It's not gonna break the relationship. Like the hard aspects aren't bad, they can cause some problems depending on the native's natal chart. So yeah, this I don't think I've ever read anything in this book where I was like, I agree with that. It was just it's very cookbooky in the sense where it's just squares and oppositions are bad and trines and sextiles are good. D tier, maybe E tier, F tier, I don't know. Barriers and Boundaries. Barriers and Boundaries by Liz Greene. The Horoscope and Defenses of the Personality. I remember reading this one and liking the first maybe quarter of it, but then the rest of it I was kind of just like, mm. I yeah, no, I remember the first half of it goes into defenses and how someone with a lot of fixed energy in their chart, for example, they're more reluctant to kind of let people in and to give out information, which is, again, you kind of get that with the fixed signs anyways, but they're more kind of suspicious of other people. They're, whatever. And then the cardinal signs, they're going to be a little bit more dependent because they are going to be more relationship orientated. And then the mutable signs, they're more just kind of, she talks about like Freud a lot, general kind of, psychological states. If you're into that, I am. You will like the first chunk of this book, but I don't remember the second half. Maybe it wasn't that good. But again, I remember this one not being as hostile as her other books. Like I don't remember her ever losing. I'm not sure like she lost her shit at students in the other books, but there was this one felt very easy and very similar to the Uranus one where it seemed like everyone was getting along. And so I remember liking this one because it was like that. Whereas her other books were kind of like, I just wanted everyone to just like shut up, and I didn't want to deal with the book because it felt like I was involved in like some kind of argument with these people on the page. But like, maybe yeah, it's probably my problem. But yeah, this book, it was kind of just, the first part was really good. Again, it probably cost me a decent chunk of money, even though it's not super big, and half of it's probably like a glossary. I mean, not half, a quarter of it's probably like a glossary. Yeah, I might put this in, yeah, maybe like B tier. It is better than most of her books and most of the other books that I have, but it wasn't great. But the psychological stuff was good. Planets in Therapy by Greg Bogart. I think I tackled this book before I was ready. I like it, good information, but I think this might be more applicable to me in maybe a couple more years because it was very mature. Not in the healing Pluto problems kind of sense, where it's talking about dark subject matter, but it gets real. It talks about, problems people have in their lives and, relationship issues that they are carrying from things that happened to them in childhood. And it's not in a judgmental way, and it's not in a way where it's kind of trying to glamorize certain things that people go through. It's just, I think this guy is a counselor, professional counselor that uses astrology in his practice. He's not, I don't think he's an astrologer that does counseling. He's like a counselor that uses astrology. And yeah, this book, I remember it gave me a really, a more professional, more steely kind of perspective on certain aspects in people's charts. It's a pretty big book. This is better than half of the books I've talked about, probably a quarter of the books I've talked about. This is going to be in like A tier, like a very, very high A tier. If you do have a more mature approach to astrology and you're actually interested in really helping people and counseling people and not just kind of doing some kind of playful interpretation of what they should be doing for a job. But if someone actually comes to you and they're actually having problems, like something like some kind of like eating disorder, you can look at this book and it will give you like really great insights into why someone might have an eating disorder that goes beyond they were molested when they were a child and goes more into they were molested as a child and their mother reacted in this way and they were already set up to kind of be shunned by the family, the black sheep of the family, and then all this other stuff in their life. It all comes back to these two aspects. It's very, yeah, non-judgmental, constructive, mature. It's not talking about these like high school kind of issues people have. It's talking about real issues people have that people don't really talk about because they're not traumatic enough to warrant a kind of mental breakdown. Do you know what I mean? It's not Plutonian in nature. This is just a really like steady approach to counseling astrology. And it's going in A tier. It's very high A tier. Astrology for the Soul by Jan Spiller. This is one of those like very new agey interpretations of the nodes, and it's all accurate. I've read this book. I found it very accurate for me, but it's kind of, and this is going to sound like such a stupid kind of critique of it, but it's so chock full of information. I have trouble retaining any of it. I might use it to like, I skim through it to kind of brush up on what someone might experience with the North Node and Capricorn, but I don't have any capacity to retain any information in this book. But it is good and it's very accurate. This would also go in A tier, but below this one. It's good. I think this is kind of available in major bookstores, whereas I think a lot of these books you kind of have to go online to get them, and probably get them secondhand. They're out of print, whatever. I think this is still in print. It's very popular, and it's popular for a reason. It's a good book. It's going in A tier. Again, it's only about the nodes. Saturn by Liz Greene. Oh my God. This is, I fucking hate this book. It's so bad. Why am I having this kind of reaction to it? I fucking hate this book. I hate it. I was so excited. I think this was the first Liz Greene book I ever got. And I got a bunch of Liz Greene books all at once because she's a very popular name in astrology. Liz Greene. Liz Greene wrote this book. She wrote this book. Everyone knows Liz Greene. And so I was like, well, she must be good. So I've got a bunch of her books. This was the first one I read because I knew this one was a book. It's not a seminar. This is a book, a kind of cookbook to Saturn, which is great. Where else are you going to find that? I mean, people have written books about it, but this is kind of the one you go to first because she's a very well-known name. And this fucking book, again, I don't like her. I don't like her. I don't like her. The seminar stuff I can get through because it's a seminar kind of setting. She's talking, the class listens, the class asks questions. None of this book makes fucking sense. I had to read every single sentence 3 times before I understood it. The way she writes makes no sense. It's so clunky. It's awful. It's awful. I don't know if I'm the only person with this opinion on this book. I don't want to hear anyone else's opinion on this book because it's shit. It was just, again, the information is probably good. Why do I want to have to work for it? And it's like very fitting for Saturn. Yeah, I get it. But like, she'll go through Saturn in the watery signs and houses. Okay, whatever, whatever. And like, I just remember this should be a book that is easy to read, that you can return back to kind of refresh yourself in some kind of situation. And she talks about the aspects between Platons and Saturn in your natal chart as well. And I think she does synastry. But man, I just remember trying to read through just the first half of the book where it's like Saturn through each of the signs. And again, it's the rhythm and prose of each sentence doesn't work. I don't know if it can't be a British, and I read, like, I obviously read a lot of books and I read a lot of fiction as well. Non-fiction, I read anything. Venus and Gemini, I read anything. There is something about this book. I it's the fucking rhythm. There's something wrong with it. And again, this was the first book of hers that I read. I read it and I hated it. And then I read her other books and how she interacts with people, and I don't like her. I don't know if I'm the only person with this opinion. I don't want to hear other people talk about Liz Greene because I don't like her that much. And I don't know why. Why is she having this effect on me? I don't know. But I fucking hate this book. This is the bottom of F tier. I would not recommend this book to anyone. I don't even have a replacement for this book. Maybe her book on Uranus, because it does cover Saturn, but not through the signs. But there is just something about this book. Again, it's probably a me issue. Let me know if you read this book and you hated it too. There is something wrong with this book. The fact I picked it up and I had such a visceral reaction to this book. I don't have any explanation for it. There's something wrong with this book. on an energetic level. I can't read it. I'm pretty well read. I read this book and have to, and it's simple sentences, but there's just something wrong with the way she's wording it. It makes it too difficult, and I don't retain any of the information either. Cycles of Light by Liz Greene. Lynn Bell. This is a book about solar returns. This is the only book I have strictly about solar returns. It's a little book. Again, solar returns are kind of a little bit abstract. If you don't have any kind of um, guidance or instruction on solar returns, this could be a bit difficult. I've read this book, I think, 4 times, and I get it now. The first time I read it, it was a little bit difficult to wrap my head around, but solar returns are kind of enigmatic. I really like her approach to it, though, and it's very approachable and very sweet in the sense of like everyone feels included. It's a seminar book as well. Everyone feels included. No one's made to feel stupid, unlike the Liz Greene books. There's something about this book where it's very sweet. It's a small book about solar returns, which shouldn't really require too much brain power. They're just a glimpse into someone's year. And it occurs on someone's birthday most of the time. It's so cute. I love solar returns for that. It's like the cherry on top of like an analysis, predictive analysis. It's a cute little book, very informative. My next book, which is my last book as well, oh my gosh, also talks about solar returns, but this is the only book I have on strictly solar returns, and it covers a lot. And it's very helpful. I would put this, yeah, in A tier. It's a pretty decent book. And then we have my last book, Predicting Events with Astrology, Celeste Teal. This one's dusty. I think it's like one of the first transit books I had, apart from the ones I covered in the beginning. This one, it's good. I didn't love it because of how much cherry picking there was that involved in these. So, the way I work is that I have the natal chart. So, in case of Shantae's natal chart, I'll look at the transits to the natal chart. I'll look at the progressions to the natal chart, any solar arcs. I'll look at the solar return to the natal chart and on its own as well, and eclipses. It's everything in relation to the natal chart. Celeste Teal in this book goes through transits to the natal chart, transits to the progress chart to the natal chart, the progress chart to the transits, so transits to progressions, and then also progressions to progressions. I'm not saying it's not valid. It's just you're gonna find reoccurring information in all of those things because you're cherry picking information. If I see something in transits to natal and then I see it in progressions to natal and there's also an eclipse, that's telling me something is going on in that area of life that needs to be addressed, especially if the client is telling me, I'm going through this and it relates to what I'm seeing in the astrology. I know I need to talk about that. If someone, for example, is trying to sell their house and move to a different country and I don't see it in the transits, and I see some of it in the progressions to the natal chart, but I see it all in the progressions and the progressions to the transits. That it's watering down the potency of the prediction, and I don't find it to be helpful. And again, there was just so much cherry picking in this book. Again, I always start off like very optimistic about a book, but by the end of it, I just feel very burnt out. And I think that's why some of the books in like S or A tier I rate so highly, because I never felt burnt out by the end because it was so cohesive, so easy to read. It all made sense. And some of these books, when they're very clunky, it's like by the end, I just want to put the book down. I don't want to read it anymore because it's so disorientating. This book, I remember being kind of disorientating. It was just very good at the beginning, and you kind of get it, and it sinks in. And then it's just her kind of reiterating the same thing over and over again. And it's kind of like, do I really need to read this for the 15th time in this book? There was also there was one thing that comes to mind that I hated about this book. She was talking about one thing, and she was talking about how maybe someone's husband got sick or something, and she was using a transit or progression to Mars to represent the husband. And like, yes, in a woman's chart, Mars can represent men, but I think it was like this was the only thing she had to correlate to the husband's sickness. And I just remember thinking like, that's just fucking cherry picking because Mars didn't rule, from memory, Mars didn't rule the woman's seventh house. It had nothing to do with her husband. It was just Mars, which can represent men. But if it's one thing you're looking at and it's to Mars instead of the sun, Saturn, or the ruler of the seventh house, or all of the above, why? It just didn't make sense to me. And I remember it really pissed me off. And I was like, why am I still reading this? I mean, I finished the book, but it was just, there is stuff like that where I just think it wasn't good enough to warrant her interpretation of why that was happening. Um, and yeah, it was just, I can't remember if she used celebrity charts. I want to say she used client charts. I could be wrong. but there was something about her writing style as well that I didn't really gel with. It wasn't super easy to read. It wasn't difficult to read, but there was just something about it. I think it was the cherry picking, the progression to progression, progression to transit. Again, probably totally valid. I don't think super necessary the way I work. Um, yeah, I'd probably put this in again. I think that it might be more available than some of the other books I've mentioned, but and it's big again. Probably a good chunk of it is a glossary. Um, yeah, I'd probably put maybe I'll give it B tier, but personally I think more like C tier. Not terrible, not great. I don't remember getting anything out of this really, apart from her using progressions to progressions and progressions to transit and how I knew that was not for me. She also covers, the solar return, the lunar return, things that I personally wouldn't look at, but you'll get a kick out of it. There's lots of stuff in here. It's just it's not for me. So yeah, B tier. And that is all of the astrology books I think that I have. I hope I haven't forgotten anything. This was such a long video. Oh my gosh, maybe I should have just done the um the Ghislaine Maxwell reading that I was meant to do. But yeah, I hope that if you are interested in astrology books like I am, that I gave some kind of helpful information. And like if you have any opposing opinions, let me know. If you agree with something I said, let me know. But yeah, anything I said that was in S tier, hands down get it. Anything in A tier, even hands down get it. B tier and so on, I just kind of think you probably could go without it. But yeah, anything by Sue Tompkins and anything by Robert Idemon. Oh, I have another Robert Idemon book somewhere, but I didn't bring it up. That one is The Magic Thread. That is also an S tier level book. Anything by Richard Idemon, anything by Sue Tompkins, absolutely get those books. They're my favorite. And yeah, I hope this video was helpful and good luck with your studies. Bye.